I stood at the altar in my grandmother's vintage lace dress, my hands trembling slightly as I held the simple bouquet of wildflowers I'd picked that morning. The small chapel was filled with soft afternoon light, filtering through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. About 30 people sat scattered throughout the space, my closest friends, a few co-workers, and Daniel's small family who had flown in from Seattle. It was exactly what I'd wanted: intimate, genuine, unpretentious. Daniel stood across from me in a navy suit he'd bought off the rack, his warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he smiled at me. His hands were steady as he reached for mine, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest. The same one I'd felt 18 months ago when he'd served me coffee at the small bistro downtown where he worked. Pastor Mitchell had just asked if anyone had objections when the chapel doors slammed open with a force that made several guests gasp. My sister Victoria stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, her designer heels clicking against the stone floor as she stormed down the aisle. Her red dress, Valentino probably, she never wore anything else, seemed to blaze in the soft light. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair swung as she marched toward us, her face contorted with an expression I'd seen countless times growing up. Righteous indignation mixed with barely concealed disgust. "Stop this," she announced, her voice echoing off the chapel walls. "Just stop this ridiculous charade right now." My mother stood up from the second pew, her face pale. "Victoria, please." "No, Mother, someone has to say something." Victoria's voice rose, shrill and sharp. She gestured wildly at Daniel, then at me. "This wedding is a joke. You're marrying a waiter, Emma, a waiter. How absolutely pathetic can you be?" The chapel fell silent, except for someone's stifled gasp. I felt my face burn, but not with shame, with a familiar cocktail of humiliation and anger that Victoria had perfected the recipe for over our 28 years as sisters. "He serves coffee for a living," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "Coffee, Emma. And you're standing here in Grandma's dress, which should have been mine, by the way, pretending this is some kind of fairy tale." She laughed, a harsh sound that made me flinch. "Do you know what people are saying? Do you know how embarrassing this is for our family?" Daniel's thumb stroked the back of my hand gently. I glanced at him and saw something unexpected in his expression. He looked almost amused, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life," Victoria said, her tone shifting to something she probably thought sounded concerned. "You could have had Marcus Aldridge. He's a partner at Morrison and Associates now, Emma, a partner. But no, you had to throw that away for this." She waved her hand dismissively at Daniel, who remained perfectly still, his expression neutral except for that tiny, enigmatic smile. "Victoria, that's enough." My father's voice cut through the chapel, firm and commanding. He stood from the front pew, his face tight with controlled anger, but Victoria wasn't finished. She turned to face the guests, her arms spread wide like she was addressing a jury. "She's settling," she announced. "My sister is settling for a man who will never be able to give her the life she deserves. She'll be counting pennies her whole life, living in some cramped apartment, working herself to death just to make ends meet." She spun back to me. "Is that really what you want? Is your pride worth a lifetime of struggle?" Something inside me snapped. Not like a twig breaking, but like a door finally closing on a room I'd spent too long trying to keep open. I'd spent my entire childhood being compared to Victoria, coming up short in my mother's eyes because I preferred books to country clubs, genuine conversations to networking events, authenticity to appearances. I'd endured years of her condescending advice, her thinly veiled insults disguised as concern, her constant need to remind me that she was the successful one, the beautiful one, the one who'd done everything right. But as I stood there, looking at Daniel's calm face, and then back at my sister's twisted expression of superiority, I realized something. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care what Victoria thought. I didn't care about the Aldridge family name or the Morrison and Associates partnership or any of the markers of success that Victoria and my mother valued above all else. "You're right," I said quietly, and Victoria's eyes widened slightly, surprised by my agreement. "I'm not marrying someone from your world, Victoria. I'm not marrying someone who measures worth in dollar signs and job titles. I'm marrying someone who makes me laugh, who reads poetry to me on Sunday mornings, who spent 6 hours helping my neighbour fix her fence because she couldn't afford a handyman. I'm marrying someone real." "How romantic," Victoria sneered, "and how naive. Love doesn't pay the mortgage, Emma. Love doesn't fund your retirement or send your kids to college. You're living in a fantasy, and one day you're going to wake up and realize you threw away every opportunity you had for a man who will never be anything more than... Should we tell her who I really am?" Daniel's voice was soft, almost conversational, as he leaned toward me. His eyes held that same amused glint, like he was watching an entertaining play. I shook my head slightly. "Not yet." Let her finish digging her hole. Victoria caught the exchange. "What was that? What did he say to you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Is there something you want to tell me, Emma? Some big secret that's supposed to make this all okay?" She laughed again, sharp and cruel. Does he have a rich uncle who's going to die soon? Is he actually a secret millionaire playing pretend?" Daniel's shoulders shook slightly with silent laughter. "You think this is funny?" Victoria's voice rose to near hysteria. "You think I'm the joke here? I'm trying to help you, and you're standing there giggling like a child." She turned to our mother. "Tell her, Mom. Tell her she's making a mistake." My mother's face was a careful mask, but I saw the conflict there. Years of social conditioning warring with something deeper. Maybe love, maybe just the knowledge that Victoria had finally crossed a line even she couldn't ignore. "Victoria," my mother said slowly, "perhaps you should..." "No." Victoria's face was flushed now, red blotches spreading across her carefully made-up cheeks. "No, I will not be quiet. I will not stand here and watch my sister ruin her life." She jabbed a finger in Daniel's direction. "What are you going to give her? Huh? What kind of life are you going to provide? You work in a bistro, for God's sake. You probably can't even afford this wedding, can you? Is she paying for it? Is my sister funding her own wedding because her groom is too poor to..." "Victoria Ann Hartwell." My father's voice cracked like a whip. "You will stop talking now." But Victoria was on a roll, her voice growing shriller with each word. She could have had everything. Marcus would have given her everything. A house in Ashford Heights. A place at the club. Connections. Security. But no, she chose to slum it with a waiter because she thinks she's too good for the life we built for her. Tears were streaming down her face now, black mascara trailing down her cheeks. But whether they were tears of rage or something else, I couldn't tell. You've always done this, Emma, always thought you were better than us, more authentic, more real, but you're not better. You're just stupid. You're too stupid to recognize opportunity when it's handed to you. The chapel was completely silent now. Even the birds outside seemed to have stopped singing. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, feel the pressure of Daniel's hand in mine, steady, grounding, real. "I'm leaving," Victoria announced suddenly, her voice hoarse. "I won't stay here and watch this train wreck, but don't come crying to me in 5 years when you're drowning in debt and wondering where your life went wrong. Don't expect me to bail you out when your fairy tale turns into a nightmare." She gathered her clutch purse from where she'd dropped it on a pew and turned toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply against the stone floor. "Victoria!" Daniel's voice stopped her halfway down the aisle. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to her, and something in his tone made everyone in the chapel turn to look at him. She spun around, her expression a mixture of triumph and contempt. "What? Do you want to defend yourself now? Tell me about all your potential? Save it." "I've heard it all before, from every loser Emma's ever dated." "I was just wondering," Daniel said conversationally, that small smile still playing at his lips, "if you'd like to know what I actually do for a living before you leave." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You work at the Blue Lotus Bistro. I've seen you there, serving coffee in your little apron. Don't try to dress it up into something it's not." "I do work at the Blue Lotus," Daniel agreed. "I've been working there 3 days a week for the past 2 years. "See?" Victoria turned to address the chapel again. "He admits it. He's a part-time waiter who can't even commit to full-time employment." "I work there because I own it," Daniel continued calmly, "along with 4 other restaurants in the city. The Blue Lotus is where I started, so I still put in shifts there a few times a week to stay connected with the staff and the day-to-day operations. It's important to me to understand every aspect of the business." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You... what?" "I also own a catering company and have investments in commercial real estate. But the restaurants are really my passion." Daniel's tone was pleasant, like he was discussing the weather. "The bistro is actually the smallest of my holdings, but it's special to me because it's where everything started. My grandfather left me some money, and I used it to open the Blue Lotus 10 years ago when I was 22. It's grown quite a bit since then." My sister's face had gone from red to white. She looked at me, then at Daniel, then at my father, as if searching for confirmation that this was some elaborate joke. My father's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight upward twitch of his mouth. He'd known. Of course he'd known. He'd done his due diligence the moment I'd brought Daniel home to meet my parents. He'd run a background check that was probably more thorough than the FBI's, because that was who my father was. Careful, protective, and incapable of trusting anyone without verification. "But you served me coffee, Victoria stammered. "You wore an apron, you cleared tables." "I did," Daniel agreed. "I still do. Like I said, I believe in understanding every level of the business. How can I expect my employees to take pride in their work if I'm not willing to do the same jobs myself? Victoria's hands were shaking now. She clutched her purse tighter, her knuckles white. Why didn't you say something? Why did you let me... Let you what? Daniel's voice was still pleasant, but there was an edge to it now. Let you assume things about me based on what I was wearing. Let you judge Emma's choices without having any actual information. I didn't let you do anything, Victoria. You chose to make assumptions. You chose to storm into your sister's wedding and humiliate her based on those assumptions. That's on you. You should have told me, Victoria insisted weakly. Why? I asked, finding my voice finally. Why should he have to prove himself to you, Victoria? Why should his worth be determined by what he owns or how much money he makes? Isn't that exactly the problem? But even as I said it, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness, because part of me, a small petty part that I wasn't proud of, was relieved that Daniel had money, that he could meet Victoria's standards, even if he chose not to flaunt it. And I hated that part of myself, the part that had been shaped by years of my mother's subtle disappointments and Victoria's overt judgments. Victoria seemed to be struggling to process everything. She looked around the chapel as if seeing it for the first time, the simple decorations, the wildflowers, the casual dress code of most of the guests. But if you have money, why all this? She gestured vaguely at our surroundings. Why not a real wedding? Why not the country club? Why not... Because this is what we wanted, I said firmly. Not what would impress people. Not what would look good in photographs for the society pages. These people, this place, something real and meaningful to us. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked different somehow. Less angry, more lost. I don't understand you, she whispered. I've never understood you. I know, I said, and I was surprised to find that I felt more pity than anger. Victoria had spent her entire life chasing markers of success that other people had defined for her, and she genuinely couldn't comprehend why someone would choose differently. She wasn't just mean, she was terrified, desperately clinging to a rule book that promised her worth if she just followed all the right steps. I should go, Victoria said, her voice small now, all the fight gone out of it. Yes, my father said quietly, I think you should. She nodded slowly, looking at me one more time. I couldn't read the expression on her face, confusion, hurt, maybe even a flicker of something that might have been regret. Then she turned and walked out of the chapel, her heels clicking softly now, all the earlier bravado drained away. The doors closed behind her with a soft thud, and for a moment no one moved. Then Pastor Mitchell cleared his throat. Well, he said dryly, shall we continue? A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the chapel. I looked at Daniel, who squeezed my hand and gave me that warm, genuine smile that had first made me fall in love with him. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry about her. Don't be, he whispered back. You're not responsible for her choices. You're only responsible for yours. His eyes softened. And you chose me, even when she was trying to convince you I wasn't enough. That means everything. Pastor Mitchell resumed his place at the front of the chapel. Now then, where were we? Ah, yes. If anyone has any objections, and I do mean legitimate objections this time, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. Beautiful, peaceful silence. Then let's continue, Pastor Mitchell said with a small smile. Daniel, your vows? Daniel took both my hands in his thumbs tracing gentle circles on my palms. Emma, when I first saw you walk into the Blue Lotus, you ordered a black coffee and pulled out a paperback copy of Jane Eyre. You sat in the corner booth for 3 hours, completely absorbed in your book, occasionally smiling or frowning at the pages like you were having a conversation with them. You didn't notice me watching you, which was good because I probably looked like a creep. Soft laughter rippled through the chapel. But what struck me wasn't just that you were beautiful, though you absolutely were. It was that you seemed so completely yourself, so comfortable in your own skin, so unbothered by what anyone else thought. Over the next few weeks, as you became a regular, I learned that what I saw that first day was real. You are exactly who you appear to be. Kind, thoughtful, genuine, passionate about the things you love, and unafraid to say what you think. You read poetry out loud in parks because it makes you happy. You cry during commercials about dogs. You leave quarters in the shopping cart returns for people who need them. You're real in a world that often rewards pretending, and that's incredibly rare and precious. His voice grew more serious. I promise to always see you for who you are, not who anyone else thinks you should be. I promise to support your dreams even when I don't fully understand them. I promise to clear tables with you and read poetry to you and cry with you during those dog commercials. I promise to choose you every day, not because you're perfect, but because you're perfect for me. I promise to build a life with you that's ours, not anyone else's idea of what our life should be, but something true and authentic and uniquely ours. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, and I didn't care that my mascara was probably running or that my nose was getting red. This was real. This moment, these words, this man, it was all real. Emma, your vows, Pastor Mitchell prompted gently. I took a shaky breath. Daniel, I was supposed to marry Marcus Aldridge. Did you know that? My mother had been planning it since I was 16. He was the right family, the right profession, the right everything according to the rule book I was raised with. And I really tried to make myself feel something for him, to want the life that everyone kept telling me I was supposed to want. I squeezed Daniel's hands tighter. But then I walked into the Blue Lotus and watched you make coffee like it mattered, like every cup was something worth doing well. You asked me about my book. You remembered my order the second time I came in. You made me laugh, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to want someone, not because they checked boxes, but because they made me feel alive. My voice broke slightly, but I pushed forward. You saw me, the real me, before you knew anything about my family or my background, or any of the things that usually define me in other people's eyes. You loved me when you thought I was just an office worker who liked to read in coffee shops. And that meant more to me than I can ever fully express, because it meant you loved me for me. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I promise to never take that for granted. I promise to be brave enough to choose authenticity over approval, even when it's hard. I promise to support your dreams and your businesses and your need to stay connected to where you started. I promise to tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I promise to build a life with you that's based on what we value, not what other people think we should value. and I promise to love you exactly as you are, not in spite of who you are, but because of it. Because you're you. And that's more than enough. That's everything. Pastor Mitchell smiled warmly at both of us. By the power vested in me, and in the presence of these witnesses, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Daniel, you may kiss your bride. Daniel pulled me close, and as his lips met mine, the chapel erupted in applause and cheers. It was a kiss that tasted like tears and promises and new beginnings, and it was absolutely perfect. The reception was held in my parents' backyard, transformed into something magical with string lights and simple white linens. My mother had insisted on hosting, and though I'd initially wanted something simpler, I'd agreed because I knew it mattered to her. Now, watching her laugh with Daniel's mother while they arranged the dessert table, I was glad I had. Victoria's absence hung over the celebration like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. My mother kept glancing at the driveway as if expecting her to return. My father maintained his characteristic stoic expression, but I caught him checking his phone several times, probably waiting for a text or call that never came. I was sitting at one of the tables, taking a quiet moment to observe everything, when my best friend Sarah dropped into the chair beside me. "So," she said, grinning widely, "that was the most dramatic wedding ceremony I've ever attended. And I once went to one where the bride's ex showed up with a mariachi band." I laughed, feeling some of the tension drain from my shoulders. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea she would—" "Are you kidding? That was amazing." Sarah leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "The look on her face when Daniel revealed he owned the restaurants? I wish I'd recorded it. That was the most satisfying moment of instant karma I've ever witnessed." "It feels wrong to be happy about it," I admitted. "She's still my sister." Sarah's expression softened. "Emma, you can love someone and still recognize that they treat you badly. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." She paused. "How are you really feeling about all of this?" I considered the question honestly. "Sad, I think. Not for me, I'm incredibly happy, but sad for her. She genuinely can't understand why I would choose this over what she thinks I should want. She's not trying to be cruel. She really believes she was helping me avoid a mistake." "That doesn't make what she did okay," Sarah pointed out. "No," I agreed, "it doesn't. But it makes it, I don't know, more complicated, I guess." Daniel appeared beside us, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to me and kissed the top of my head. "Your uncle wants to give a toast in 5 minutes, he said. "Fair warning, I've been told he's had 3 glasses of wine and is feeling particularly sentimental, according to your mother." I groaned. "That means he's going to tell the story about the time I tried to run away from home when I was 7 because Victoria told me I was adopted." "You tried to run away when you were 7? Daniel asked, amused. "I made it to the end of the driveway before I realized I'd forgotten my stuffed rabbit and had to go back." I took a sip of champagne. Victoria thought it was hilarious. My mother grounded her for a week. Sarah stood up, squeezing my shoulder. "I'm going to go find my date and make sure he hasn't eaten all the crab cakes. You two enjoy the toast." As she walked away, Daniel settled into her vacated chair. "Your sister texted me," he said quietly. I turned to look at him sharply. "What? When?" "About 20 minutes ago." He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. The message read, "I'm sorry. That was inappropriate and cruel. I hope you can forgive me someday. Tell Emma I love her, even if I have a terrible way of showing it. I stared at the words, feeling a complex tangle of emotions. What did you say back? Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Daniel set his phone down on the table. How do you want to handle this? I thought about it, turning my champagne glass in my hands. Can I tell you something? When you told her about the restaurants, part of me was relieved, and I hate that. I hate that some small piece of me needed her to know that you were acceptable by her standards. That's human, Daniel said gently. You spent your whole life being judged by those standards. You can't flip a switch and make that conditioning disappear. But I should be able to, I insisted. I should be able to not care what she thinks. Why? Daniel asked. Why should you be able to completely not care about your sister's opinion? She's your sister. You grew up together. Her opinion mattered for most of your life. It's not weak to still feel that connection, Emma. It's normal. I leaned my head against his shoulder. When did you get so wise? I run a successful business empire, he said, mock seriously. Wisdom is included in the package. I laughed, then sobered. Do you want to respond to her? It's not my decision to make, Daniel said. She's your sister. This is your relationship to navigate. I'll support whatever you decide. Before I could respond, my uncle's voice boomed across the yard. Can I have everyone's attention, please? I'd like to make a toast to the happy couple. Daniel helped me to my feet, and we made our way to the centre of the yard, where a small makeshift stage had been set up for speeches. My uncle was already there, glass in hand, swaying slightly. Emma, he began, his voice thick with emotion and wine. When you were born, I held you in my arms and thought, this one's going to be different. And I was right. He gestured broadly, nearly spilling his champagne. You were always different from the rest of us. You asked questions. You challenged things. You read books that had too many pages and not enough pictures. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Your sister? He continued, and I tensed, wondering where this was going. She always did what was expected. Straight A's, right college, right job, right everything. And we all said, look at Victoria, so perfect, so successful. But you know what? Emma was the one who was brave enough to be imperfect, to choose her own path, to fall in love with a man she met in a coffee shop instead of the one we all thought she should marry. He raised his glass higher. And now, seeing you up here with Daniel, I understand something I should have understood a long time ago. Success isn't about checking boxes. It's about finding something real and holding on to it. It's about being brave enough to be yourself, even when everyone around you is trying to tell you who to be. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. So here's to Emma and Daniel, my uncle declared. May your life together be filled with imperfect, messy, absolutely real love. May you always choose each other over what other people think you should choose. And may you always, always remember that the bravest thing you can do is be exactly who you are. Hear, hear, the crowd chorused, raising their glasses. As the applause died down and my uncle stepped off the stage to be intercepted by my mother, who was clearly concerned about his wine consumption, Daniel pulled me close. That was beautiful, I murmured against his chest. It was, he agreed. Though I think your mother is about to cut him off. I watched as my mother firmly removed the wine glass from my uncle's hand and replaced it with a bottle of water. Despite everything, the drama with Victoria, the years of subtle pressure to be someone I wasn't, I felt a surge of love for my family. They were complicated and flawed and sometimes drove me absolutely insane, but they were mine. I think I want to respond to Victoria, I said suddenly. Not right now, not today, but soon. I want to tell her that I forgive her, but I also need her to understand why what she did was wrong. Not just wrong in the moment, but part of a pattern of behaviour that's been hurting me for years. Daniel nodded slowly. That sounds healthy and hard. The best things usually are, I said, echoing something he'd said to me months ago when I was agonising over whether to accept his marriage proposal. We'd been dating for 10 months when he proposed. We'd been hiking at Riverside Park, my favourite spot in the city, and had stopped at the Overlook where you could see the entire downtown skyline. He'd simply pulled the ring from his pocket and said, I want to spend my life with you. Not because we've been dating for some arbitrary amount of time that makes this appropriate, but because I'm sure, I've been sure since the 3rd time you came into the Blue Lotus and told me about the book you were reading. I'm not asking you to be sure right this second. Take whatever time you need. But I wanted you to know where I stand. I'd been terrified. 10 months felt too soon by the standards I'd been raised with. My mother would say we barely knew each other. Victoria would roll her eyes and make comments about rushing into things. All my life I'd been taught that there was a proper timeline for these things, a correct sequence of events. But standing there on that overlook, looking at Daniel's earnest face and the ring that he'd clearly chosen with care, simple, elegant, exactly my style. I'd realised something. I was tired of living by other people's timelines. I was tired of second-guessing my own feelings because they didn't match up with what I was supposed to feel. So I'd said yes. The memory made me smile now. Standing in my parents' backyard in my grandmother's dress, married to a man my sister thought was beneath me. I'd chosen right. I'd chosen authenticity over approval, love over logic, my own truth over someone else's expectations. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, noticing my expression. About how glad I am that I said yes to you on that overlook, I said. About how different my life would be if I'd listened to all the voices telling me to wait, to be practical, to choose someone more suitable. You would have been miserable, Daniel said matter-of-factly. Probably, I agreed. But I also would have convinced myself I was happy because that's what I'd been taught to do. Smile, don't complain. Be grateful for what you have, even if it's not what you want. That's depressing, Daniel observed. It really is, I said. Then I stood on my tiptoes and kissed him. Thank you for being you, for not being Marcus Aldridge or anyone else I was supposed to want. For making coffee like it matters and reading poetry in parks and showing me what real looks like. You're welcome, he said softly. And thank you for being brave enough to choose it. My father appeared beside us, clearing his throat awkwardly. Emma, could I speak with you for a moment, privately? I glanced at Daniel, who squeezed my hand and nodded. I'll go check on the cake situation. Your cousin mentioned something about the frosting sliding off in the heat. As he walked away, my father guided me toward the quiet corner of the yard, away from the clusters of celebrating guests. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. I blinked, surprised. My father wasn't the apologising type. For what? For not speaking up more over the years, for letting your mother and Victoria set the tone for what success should look like in this family." He ran a hand through his greying hair. "I watched you struggle to fit into a mould that was never right for you, and I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that you needed to find your own way. But today, watching Victoria say those things to you," he shook his head, "I should have said something years ago. I should have told you that it was okay to want different things, to be different." "Dad, let me finish," he said gently. "When I did the background check on Daniel, yes, I know you knew about that. I was looking for red flags, for reasons to warn you off. But what I found was a young man who'd built something real through hard work and integrity. No shortcuts, no family connections, just genuine talent and dedication. And I thought, this is exactly the kind of person Emma needs. Someone who values the same thing she does." My throat tightened with emotion. "You never said anything." "I should have," he admitted. "I should have pulled you aside after you introduced us and told you that I approved, that I thought you'd found something good. Instead, I stayed silent while your mother fretted about his prospects, and Victoria made her snide comments about you dating down." He looked at me directly, his eyes serious. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." I hugged him, something we didn't do often in our family. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, wrapping his arms around me. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." When we pulled apart, he cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional display. "Your mother wants to talk to you too. She's in the kitchen. She's upset about Victoria." "I know," I said. "I saw her checking her phone." "Go easy on her," my father said. "She's trying. This whole situation has forced her to confront some things about how she raised you girls, and that's not easy for anyone. I found my mother in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a platter with meticulous precision. She didn't look up when I entered, but her shoulders tensed, indicating she knew I was there. "Mom," I said softly. She set down the cookie she was holding and finally met my eyes. Her carefully applied makeup was slightly smudged, and I realized with a shock that she'd been crying. "I'm so sorry about Victoria," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "What she did was inexcusable. I've tried calling her 6 times, but she won't answer." "It's not your fault," I said, though part of me wondered if that was entirely true. Victoria hadn't developed her worldview in a vacuum. "Isn't it?" My mother's voice cracked slightly. "I raised her to value the things she values. I taught her that success meant the right schools, the right job, the right marriage. And I taught you the same thing, even when it was clear from the time you were 10 years old that you wanted something different." She wiped at her eyes carefully, trying not to smudge her makeup further. "I watched you try so hard to be what I wanted you to be. You dated Marcus for 6 months, even though you were miserable. You applied to law school, even though you wanted to teach. You wore the clothes I picked out and went to the events I chose and tried so desperately to fit into the life I'd planned for you." "Mom." "And then you met Daniel," she continued, "and I saw you start to bloom into who you actually were. You quit your job at the firm to teach at the community college. You started wearing clothes that made you happy instead of clothes that looked appropriate. You read poetry in public without being embarrassed about it. You became yourself. She paused, taking a shaky breath. And instead of being happy for you, I criticised. I made comments about Daniel's job, about your choices, about how you were wasting your potential. I became exactly what I swore I'd never be when I was your age. The mother who couldn't see her daughter for who she actually was. I'd never heard my mother talk like this before. She was always so controlled, so careful with her words and emotions. Seeing her like this, raw, honest, vulnerable, was disconcerting and touching in equal measure. When your father told me what Daniel actually does for a living, she said quietly, my first reaction was relief. Relief that you hadn't actually married down, that I wouldn't have to be embarrassed when my friends asked about your husband. And then I was ashamed of myself for feeling that way, because it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what he does or how much money he makes. What should matter is that he makes you happy, that he treats you well, that he loves you for who you are. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Does he make you happy? More than I knew was possible, I said honestly. She nodded slowly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Then I'm happy for you, truly, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. We hugged then, really hugged, for the first time in years. She smelled like the Chanel perfume she'd worn my entire life, familiar and comforting despite everything. What are you going to do about Victoria? I asked when we pulled apart. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to call her and tell her she needs to apologise immediately. But another part of me thinks maybe she needs time to sit with what happened, to really think about her behaviour without me swooping in to smooth things over, like I always do. You always smooth things over for her? I asked, surprised. My mother gave me a wry smile. Why do you think she's gotten away with being so thoughtless for so long? Every time she hurts someone's feelings or crosses a line, I'm there to make excuses, to explain that she didn't mean it that way, to fix whatever damage she caused. Your father's been telling me for years that I'm enabling her, but I didn't want to see it. So what changed? I asked. Watching her try to destroy your wedding day, my mother said simply, seeing the look on your face when she called you pathetic. Realizing that my need to keep the peace had created a monster who thinks she's entitled to treat people however she wants, because someone will always clean up the mess. She picked up the cookie platter again, needing something to do with her hands. So this time I'm not calling her back. I'm not making excuses. I'm letting her sit with the consequences of her actions. I squeezed her hand. That must be hard for you. It is, she admitted, but it's necessary. For her and for me. She managed a small smile. Now go. Your husband is probably wondering where you've disappeared to. And Emma... She caught my hand as I turned to leave. Thank you for being brave enough to be yourself. Even when I made it difficult, you've taught me something important today. I found Daniel outside, and true to his word, he was examining the wedding cake with my cousin Jennifer, who ran a small bakery downtown. The 3-tier vanilla cake with buttercream frosting was indeed listing slightly to one side in the summer heat. We can prop it with these, Jennifer was saying, wedging small pieces of cardboard under one side of the cake stand. It won't be perfect, but it'll hold until you cut it. Perfection is overrated anyway, I said, joining them. Daniel's face lit up when he saw me. There you are. Your father commandeered you for a while. He wanted to apologize, I said, and then my mother did too. Wow, Daniel said. This is turning into quite the day for family revelations. Jennifer finished adjusting the cake and stepped back to survey her work. There. It should be fine now. Just cut it soon, okay? Before it gets any hotter. As she walked away, Daniel pulled me close. How are you holding up? This has been a lot. I'm okay, I said, and I was surprised to realize it was true. Actually, I'm better than okay. I feel like something shifted today. Not just with Victoria, but with my whole family. Like, we're finally being honest with each other instead of pretending everything's fine. Honesty is good, Daniel agreed. Messy, but good. The DJ, Sarah's boyfriend Marcus, who'd agreed to handle the music as our wedding gift, announced that it was time for the first dance. Daniel led me to the small wooden dance floor that had been set up in the centre of the yard. And as the opening notes of Can't Help Falling in Love began to play, he pulled me into his arms. This is nice, I murmured, resting my head against his chest. Just us dancing after the craziest ceremony in history. I don't know, Daniel said thoughtfully. I once went to a wedding where the bride's pet parrot flew away with the rings. This might be second craziest. I laughed, and he spun me gently, his hand warm and steady on my lower back. Around us, I could see our guests watching, some smiling, some swaying to the music, all of them part of this imperfect, beautiful moment. I love you, I said, suddenly looking up at him. I love you too, he replied, even when your sister calls me pathetic. She called me pathetic, I corrected. She called you a waiter. Right, my mistake. His eyes crinkled with amusement. Though technically, I am a waiter. I just also happen to own the restaurant. The song ended, and the DJ invited everyone else to join us on the dance floor. My father appeared at my elbow, asking for a dance, while Daniel's mother claimed him with a warm smile. As my father and I moved across the dance floor in a careful waltz, he said quietly, I meant what I said earlier about being sorry. I know, Dad. Your sister called me an hour ago, he continued, and I nearly stumbled. I didn't answer. I thought you should know that. Why didn't you answer? I asked. Because I'm angry with her, he said simply, and because I think your mother is right. Victoria needs to face consequences for once in her life. She can't behave that way and have everyone immediately forgive her because it's easier than holding her accountable. I thought about Victoria alone somewhere, probably in her pristine apartment with its designer furniture and carefully curated Instagram-worthy aesthetic. Was she crying, angry, genuinely remorseful? It was hard to know with Victoria. She'd spent so long building walls around her real feelings that even she probably didn't know what was behind them anymore. Do you think she'll apologise? I asked. Eventually, my father said, but only if we give her the space to realise she needs to. If we rush to make her feel better, she'll just see this as another bump in the road that got smoothed over. The song changed, and Daniel appeared to reclaim me. My father kissed my cheek and disappeared back into the crowd, probably to find my mother. Your dad seems different tonight, Daniel observed as we began to dance again. Everyone seems different tonight, I said. Like Victoria's outburst cracked something open that needed to be cracked. Silver lining? Daniel suggested. Maybe? I rested my head against his shoulder again, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with the sweet smell of the garden flowers surrounding us. Is it weird that I'm having a good time at my own wedding, despite, or maybe because of, the drama? Not weird at all, Daniel said. You're finally getting to be honest about who you are and what you want. That's liberating. The reception continued into the evening. We cut the slightly lopsided cake and everyone pretended not to notice when a small chunk of frosting slid off the bottom tier. My uncle gave another rambling toast that had to be gently cut short by my mother. Sarah's boyfriend Marcus kept the music flowing, transitioning smoothly from dinner background music to more upbeat dancing songs as the sun began to set. Around 8 o'clock, as the string lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk, my phone buzzed with a text. I pulled it from the small pocket Daniel had insisted the seamstress add to my dress. Every bride needs somewhere to keep her phone, he'd said, and I'd loved him even more for understanding that I'd be anxious without it. The message was from Victoria. Can we talk? Not tonight. I know it's your wedding, but soon. I showed the text to Daniel. What do you want to do? He asked. I thought about it for a long moment, watching the guests laughing and dancing, my parents standing close together near the dessert table, Sarah spinning her boyfriend around the dance floor with wild abandon. I'll respond tomorrow, I decided. Tell her yes, we can talk, but I need a few days. I need to figure out what I want to say. That sounds reasonable, Daniel said. I typed out a quick reply. Yes, give me a week, then we'll talk. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Emma, for everything. I didn't respond to that. Sorry was just a word. What mattered was whether Victoria actually understood why she needed to be sorry. Whether she was willing to do the work to change, whether our relationship could be rebuilt on a foundation of honesty instead of obligation. But those were questions for another day. Tonight was for celebrating the choice I'd made. To marry a man who saw me, who valued the same things I valued, who was willing to serve coffee in his own restaurant because he believed in understanding every level of the work. Dance with me again? I asked Daniel. Always, he said, pulling me back onto the dance floor. As we moved together under the string lights, surrounded by people who loved us, I felt something settle in my chest, a sense of rightness, of being exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because it was what anyone expected, but because it was true. The reception wound down around 11. Guests began to drift away, hugging us goodbye, pressing envelopes with cards and checks into our hands, offering congratulations and best wishes. My parents insisted on handling the cleanup, shooing us away with tired smiles. You're married now, my mother said, kissing my cheek. Go start your life together. We'll take care of this. Daniel had booked us a room at the Riverside Hotel downtown, the same hotel where we'd had our first official date, dinner at their rooftop restaurant. As we drove through the quiet city streets, I found myself replaying the day in my mind, each moment sharp and vivid. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, glancing over at me from the driver's seat. Everything, I said. Victoria's speech, your revelation, my parents' apologies, all of it. Regrets? He asked quietly. Not even one, I said firmly. You? Only that I didn't tell Victoria about the restaurant sooner, just to see her face. He grinned. Is that petty? Extremely, I said. but I'll allow it. We pulled up to the hotel, and the valet took our car while a bellhop grabbed our overnight bags from the trunk. The lobby was quiet at this hour, just a few late-night travellers checking in, a couple having drinks at the bar. In the elevator, Daniel pulled me close and kissed me properly for the first time since the ceremony. "Hello, Mrs. Morrison," he murmured against my lips. "Hello, Mr. Morrison," I replied, smiling. I'd decided to take his name, not because it was expected, but because I wanted to. Emma Morrison felt like a fresh start, a new chapter, a chance to define myself on my own terms. Our room was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the river. A king-sized bed with crisp white linens, champagne chilling in an ice bucket. But what caught my attention was the small stack of books on the nightstand, all of them favourites I'd mentioned to Daniel over the months we'd been dating. "You remembered?" I said softly, picking up the worn copy of Jane Eyre on top. "Of course I remembered," Daniel said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "You told me once that you judge hotels by whether they have good reading lamps. I wanted to make sure you'd be comfortable." I turned in his arms and kissed him deeply. "Have I mentioned that I love you?" "Once or twice," he said, smiling, "but I never get tired of hearing it." We opened the champagne and stood by the windows, looking out at the city lights, reflecting off the dark water of the river below. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably still awake, maybe still crying, definitely still processing what had happened. My parents were likely home by now, discussing the day over their own glasses of wine. Sarah was probably texting me, I'd silenced my phone earlier, to get all the details I hadn't had time to share. But here, in this room, it was just us. Just Emma and Daniel Morrison, beginning the life we'd chosen together. "What do you think the next few weeks will be like?" I asked, leaning back against Daniel's chest. "With Victoria, I mean." "Complicated," Daniel said honestly, "but necessary. You need to have that conversation with her, set some boundaries, figure out what kind of relationship you want to have going forward." "What if we can't fix it?" I asked quietly. "What if too much damage has been done?" "Then you'll grieve that loss and move forward," Daniel said gently. "You'll build a life with the people who see you and value you for who you are. You'll create your own definition of family." I thought about that, creating my own definition of family. It felt both terrifying and liberating. For so long, family had meant obligation, expectation, trying to fit into a mould that was never quite right. But maybe it could mean something different. Maybe it could mean choosing the people who chose you back, who supported your growth instead of trying to prune you into a shape they found more acceptable. "I want to try to fix it," I said finally, "with Victoria. I want to at least give her the chance to understand why what she did was wrong, to change if she's willing. But I also want to be okay with walking away if she's not willing to do that work." "That sounds incredibly healthy," Daniel said, "and incredibly hard." "Yeah," I agreed. "It does." We finished our champagne in comfortable silence, watching the river flow by below. Tomorrow we'd fly to Ireland for our honeymoon. 2 weeks of exploring countryside, visiting bookshops, staying in cosy bed and breakfasts. 2 weeks of being just us, away from family drama and complicated relationships and all the noise of regular life. But tonight we were here, in this room, in this moment, in this new beginning. "Ready for bed?" Daniel asked, stifling a yawn. "More than ready," I said. "It's been a very long day." As I changed into my pyjamas in the spacious bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. My makeup was mostly gone, my hair had come loose from its careful updo, and there was a small stain on my dress from where someone had spilled red wine during the reception. I looked nothing like the perfect bride from magazine covers or Pinterest boards. I looked real, imperfect, happy. I smiled at my reflection, then went to join my husband, in bed. 1 week later, I sat across from Victoria in a quiet coffee shop downtown. Not the Blue Lotus, that felt too charged, too much like my territory. Instead, we met at a neutral space neither of us frequented, a small, independent shop in a neighbourhood between our 2 apartments. Victoria looked different than she had at the wedding. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a plain t-shirt instead of her usual designer ensembles. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly. "You're my sister," I said. "Of course I'd meet you." She flinched at that. "I'm not sure I deserve to still be called your sister after what I did." "Probably not," I agreed, and she looked up sharply, surprised by my honesty. "But you are. That's just a fact. The question is what kind of sisters we're going to be going forward." Victoria nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that a lot this week, about what kind of sister I've been to you." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "I've been a terrible sister, Emma, not just at your wedding, but for years, maybe our whole lives." "Tell me why you came to the wedding," I said. "The real reason, not the excuse you gave about trying to save me from making a mistake." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her coffee. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was jealous." "Of what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You have everything, the perfect job, the perfect apartment, the perfect life." "I have everything that's supposed to make me happy," Victoria corrected. "But I'm not happy, Emma. I'm miserable. I wake up every morning in my perfect apartment and put on my perfect clothes and go to my perfect job. And all I can think is this it? Is this all there is?" She looked up at me, and I was startled to see tears in her eyes. "And then I see you. You left the firm to teach at a community college, which I told everyone was a stupid move. You started dating a guy you met in a coffee shop, which I said was reckless and impulsive. You made all these choices that I told you were wrong, that were going to ruin your life. And you know what? You were glowing. You were happier than I'd ever seen you. And I hated it." "Why?" I asked softly. "Because if you could be happy making wrong choices," Victoria said, "then what did that say about all my right ones? I've spent my entire life following the rules, checking off boxes, doing everything I was supposed to do. And I'm alone and stressed and constantly anxious that I'm going to slip up, that I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. Meanwhile, you threw out the rule book and found something real." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "So when I walked into that chapel and saw you getting married, looking so happy and so sure, something inside me just snapped. Because I'm 32 years old and I've never been that sure of anything in my life. I've never looked at someone the way you looked at Daniel. I've never made a choice based purely on what I wanted instead of what I thought I should want." I sat back in my chair. processing this. I'd expected a lot of things from this conversation. Defensiveness, excuses, maybe a perfunctory apology designed to smooth things over. I hadn't expected this raw, painful honesty. "I'm sorry," Victoria continued. "I'm so sorry for what I said at your wedding, for how I treated Daniel, for years of making you feel like you weren't good enough, because you didn't want the same things I wanted. I've been projecting my own fears and insecurities onto you, and that's not fair. That's not what sisters should do." "No," I agreed. "It's not." "Can you forgive me?" Victoria asked, her voice breaking slightly. I thought carefully before answering. "I can forgive you for the wedding," I said slowly. "That was one bad day. One terrible choice made in a moment of emotion. But the pattern you're describing, making me feel less than, criticizing my choices, treating my life like it's somehow inferior to yours, that's not one day, that's years. And I can't just forgive years of behaviour because you had an epiphany." Victoria's face crumpled, but she nodded. "You're right, I know you're right. But," I continued, "I'm willing to try to rebuild our relationship if you are. Not the relationship we had, where you got to judge me and I had to defend myself constantly. Something different, something more equal." "I'd like that," Victoria whispered. "I'd like that a lot. I just don't know how to be a different person." "Neither do I admitted. "But maybe we can figure it out together, with some ground rules." "What kind of ground rules?" Victoria asked. "No more comments about my job or my life choices," I said firmly. "If you have concerns, you can express them once, kindly, and then you have to let it go. My life is mine to live, and I don't need your approval." Victoria nodded. "Okay. And you need to apologise to Daniel," I continued. "A real apology, not just saying you're sorry, but explaining what you're sorry for and why it was wrong." "I can do that," Victoria said. "Is there anything else?" "Therapy," I said. "I think you should talk to someone about this pressure you feel, this anxiety about following all the rules. It's clearly making you unhappy. And it's affecting your relationships." Victoria looked surprised. "You want me to go to therapy?" "I think it would help you," I said honestly. "Not because there's something wrong with you, but because you deserve to figure out what actually makes you happy instead of what you think should make you happy." Victoria was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll look into it. And finally," I said, "I need you to understand that this is going to take time. I can't just flip a switch and trust you again. You hurt me, Victoria. You've been hurting me for a long time. Building back from that is going to be slow and it's going to be hard." "I understand," Victoria said, "and I'm willing to do the work, whatever it takes." We sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping our coffee, both of us processing the weight of this conversation. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said finally. "Sure." "When Daniel told me about the restaurants, why didn't you look smug? Why didn't you rub it in my face that I'd been wrong about him?" I considered the question. "Because it shouldn't matter. The fact that Daniel owns restaurants shouldn't make him more worthy of respect than if he was just a waiter. His worth isn't determined by his bank account, and the fact that you, and honestly, part of me too, felt relieved when we found out he had money just proves how messed up our values have been, Ikiao." Victoria absorbed this. "Mum's values," she said quietly. "Not ours. We were just kids. We didn't know any better." But we're not kids anymore, I pointed out. We get to choose what we believe now. We get to question what we were taught and decide if it actually makes sense. That's scary, Victoria admitted. Yeah, I agreed. It really is. My sister looked at me across the table, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was seeing the real Victoria. Not the perfect facade she presented to the world, but the scared, uncertain person underneath. Thank you for giving me another chance, she said softly. Thank you for being honest, I replied. That must have been hard. Hardest thing I've ever done, Victoria admitted. Except maybe walking out of your wedding after making a complete fool of myself. I surprised myself by laughing. Yeah, that was pretty spectacular. Mum was horrified. I know, she left me 3 voicemails. Victoria managed a small smile. She's never done that before. Usually she calls once, leaves a gentle message about how we should talk, and that's it. This time she actually sounded angry. She was, I confirmed. She didn't call you back, did she? No, Victoria said, looking surprised. Neither did Dad. I've never had them both be mad at me at the same time before. It was unsettling. Good, I said firmly. You needed to feel unsettled. You needed to sit with the consequences of your actions instead of having someone swoop in and make it all okay. Victoria nodded slowly. You're right, I did. She paused. You've changed, Emma. You're stronger than you used to be, more sure of yourself. I had to be, I said. Being around you and Mom, always feeling like I was coming up short, it was exhausting. Eventually, I had to choose between trying to be who you wanted me to be or being who I actually was. Daniel helped me see that I could choose the latter. He's good for you, Victoria said quietly. I can see that now. I'm sorry I couldn't see it before. We talked for another hour, carefully mapping out what our new relationship might look like. Victoria agreed to text before just showing up at my apartment, something she'd had a habit of doing in the past. I agreed to be patient with her as she worked through her issues in therapy. We both agreed to be honest with each other, even when it was uncomfortable. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation with hugs and tears and instant forgiveness. But it was real. It was a start. As we were getting ready to leave, Victoria hesitated, then said, I really am happy for you, Emma. About the wedding, about Daniel, about the life you're building. It might have taken me a while to get there, but I mean it. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. We parted ways on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop. Victoria heading back to her apartment in the financial district. Me heading home to the cosy 2-bedroom I now shared with Daniel. When I walked in, I found him in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner while simultaneously taking a work call. He'd rolled up the sleeves of his button-down shirt and had a smudge of tomato sauce on his cheek. He muted the phone when he saw me. How did it go? He mouthed. I gave him a thumbs up and he smiled, unmuting to continue his conversation about supplier contracts for one of the restaurants. I changed into comfortable clothes and settled onto the couch with one of the books from our hotel room, content to wait until Daniel finished his call. This was my life now. Simple dinners in our small kitchen, books and quiet evenings. A partner who understood me and supported my growth. It wasn't the life my mother had planned for me. It wasn't the life Victoria thought I should want, but it was mine, chosen deliberately, built on a foundation of authenticity rather than expectation. And it was more than enough. It was everything. Daniel finished his call and joined me on the couch, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. So, give me the full report. I told him everything, Victoria's confession about her jealousy, her agreement to go to therapy, the ground rules we'd established for our relationship going forward. "I'm proud of you," Daniel said when I finished. "That must have been difficult." "It was," I admitted. "But it was also necessary. I couldn't just pretend the wedding didn't happen. Couldn't just sweep it under the rug like we'd swept so many other things under the rug over the years." "Do you think things will actually change between you two?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I hope so, but I also know that I'll be okay if they don't. That's the difference, I think. Before, I needed her approval, needed her to see me as valuable. Now I know my worth doesn't depend on whether she recognizes it." Daniel kissed the top of my head. "Like I said, I'm proud of you." We ordered takeout instead of cooking. Daniel's tomato sauce experiment had been abandoned in favour of his work call. And spent the evening on the couch, eating pad thai and watching old episodes of a show we'd been meaning to catch up on. It was ordinary, it was perfect. My phone buzzed around 9, with a text from my mother. "Victoria told me you two talked. Thank you for giving her another chance. And thank you for setting boundaries. She needs that, even if it's uncomfortable for all of us." I showed the text to Daniel. "Your family's doing a lot of growing this week," he observed. "Yeah," I said, "it's weird, good, but weird." Another text came through, this time from Victoria. "I scheduled an appointment with a therapist for next week. First step, right?" I typed back, "First step, proud of you." 3 dots appeared then. "I'm going to do better, Em. I promise." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did believe her, but I also knew that change was hard, that promises were easy to make and difficult to keep. Only time would tell if Victoria's epiphany would translate into actual lasting transformation. But that was okay. I didn't need guarantees. I didn't need to know how everything would turn out. I just needed to keep showing up as myself. Keep choosing authenticity over approval. Keep building the life I actually wanted instead of the one I thought I should want. Daniel pulled me closer, and I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. Outside our window, the city continued its endless motion, cars driving by, people walking home from late shifts, restaurants closing up for the night. Somewhere in that city, Victoria was probably lying awake in her perfect apartment, thinking about her therapist appointment and wondering if she could really change. My parents were probably having their own conversation about how they'd contributed to the dynamics between their daughters. But here, in our small apartment with its mismatched furniture and overflowing bookshelves and the faint smell of abandoned tomato sauce, I was exactly where I needed to be. "I love you," I told Daniel, not for the first time that day, and certainly not for the last. "I love you too," he replied, pulling me even closer. "My pathetic wife who married a waiter." I laughed, smacking his arm playfully. Too soon. "Is it though?" he asked, grinning. I think we should make it our inside joke. Every time someone asks how we met, I'll say she took pity on a poor waiter. "You're ridiculous," I said, but I was smiling. "You married me anyway," he pointed out. "Best decision I ever made," I said firmly, and I meant it, every word.